The federal government has introduced a new bill that it says will help law enforcement track and identify suspected criminals online.
We're going to better equip police forces to investigate and to prevent human trafficking, smuggling, extortion, and a number of other very, very serious crimes that demand the full attention of the government. These processes are designed to protect people's privacy rights, but ensure that we have the modern tools that are necessary to address crimes that are taking place in the modern world.
The lawful access bill would allow law enforcement to compel telecom companies like Bell or Rogers to provide a yes or no answer when asked if a suspected criminal uses their services. It would also require electronic service providers to have the capability to track user locations. But the bill does not compel AI or social media companies to share information or report suspicious activity to Canadian authorities. Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangaree joins me now. Welcome to the show. This new legislation comes after some pretty deep criticisms over a similar bill from your government in June, Bill C2. There were concerns over snooping and privacy and overreach. How does this bill address those concerns while also balancing the need to keep Canadians safe?
Look, Bill C2 had a number of important elements. In fact, there's 8 different components to the bill. Lawful access was just one of those elements. As you're aware, Bill C12 has captured most of the measures as part of the Strong Borders Act. Lawful access is something that law enforcement in Canada have been looking for three decades. So when we introduced lawful access as part of C2, we realized that we needed to do a bit more work, so we retreated. We got Murray Rankin, who's the former minister from British Columbia and a former colleague. I was a member of parliament from the NDP. And we had him conduct some mediations with law enforcement, with civil society groups, with academics, with those who are working on the front lines of, for example, child protection, working around issues of childhood sexual exploitation. And we had him work through some of the criticism, some of the challenges that I think people express. And we've come back with what I believe is a much more constrained, limited in scope bill with some very important safeguards that people have asked for.
Well, let's talk about those safeguards.
Sure.
What are some of the guardrails that you have in place to protect Canadians' privacy?
Sure. Look, the initial bill had the notion of service provider as an undefined category. So the allegation was, look, can somebody go to my psychiatrist and ask the psychiatrist if
because they're a service provider.
I'm a patient or not. And those were never the intention, as you're aware. And common law already will prevent us from seeking that type of information. So what we've done here is have some clear exclusions. So first and foremost, anything to do with medical is a hard no. Anything to do with solicitor-client privilege or legal advice is a hard no. And then we've defined it and narrowed it to the scope being with electronic service providers.
You still have to define electronic service providers, though, right?
There are some certainly definitions, but it is limited. It doesn't mean you can go to a hotel chain and say, hey, is this person your customer? Or go to an airline or go to a range of services. And I think this is the challenge we had before. It was open-ended, so people could just use their imagination and say, oh, like, are they going to go to my hairdresser and see, if I'm their customer? And these are, look, legitimate concerns, and that's why we narrowed the scope. We also have a 3-year review, which is absolutely critical. Also, there's a need for the minister to consult the Information Commissioner on certain matters. So we have many safeguards in place, and since it's much more narrow than the original C2, I believe Canadians should be assured that what we have in place is absolutely required for law enforcement with limited scope, but also with the safeguards that will protect their civil rights.
And one of those safeguards would also be that while you don't need, law enforcement doesn't need a warrant to find out from a service provider whether someone's a customer or not, but they still will need a warrant to actually then once they've confirmed that, get the information that they want in terms of the person's address and IP address and that
Absolutely,
kind of thing.
and it just goes to the only element in which you could go to someone without a warrant is to go to a telco and say, does this telephone or does this IP address, does that match like your record? Like, are they your customer? Only one question, either yes or no. If it's a no, it stops there. If it's a yes, then then you would have to go in front of a judge and get a warrant.
Now, this legislation would create a framework for how Canadian law enforcement can make information requests to foreign social media companies like OpenAI, which is mentioned explicitly. But it doesn't compel those companies to share the kind of information we might be looking for or to report suspicious activities. Is that simply because we can't compel them to do that because they're foreign companies?
Well, we do have a mutual assistance agreement with the United States, for example, where there is a demand for information that we can place through the U.S. Look, the laws are different in every jurisdiction, and we have to have those bilateral agreements before we can seek that type of information. In the case of, for example, many of the major tech companies, they are situated in the U.S., and sometimes the jurisdiction is there, and we'll need to seek authority from the U.S. judiciary to be able to compel information to be shared with us. We are having a broader debate around the role of online harms and the impact it has on our children, and one of the things I'm hoping for is that we'll have much greater cooperation with companies that provide social media services.
But what is to stop a social media company from refusing to cooperate? It does kind of feel like we're talking about this, it's mentioned in legislation, but it's a bit of an empty measure because we don't actually have the power to compel them.
We're already doing that right now. We're already, through judicial authorization, we're already seeking information from different, Instagram, for example, Meta, Twitter.
But does this legislation speed up that process that's already underway, or because we don't have that power, we're still just in the same situation as we were before?
I think for the most part, for those originating from Canada, it really does speed up the timelines. Our expectation is even with different international partners, we'll have an expedited process. Both the Five Eyes and G7 countries have regimes in place in their respective jurisdictions. We are actually an outlier in this area, and I do believe that because our companies and our industry cooperates with requests from foreign entities as well, foreign governments, that is judicially authorized. We are expecting the same type of compliance.
And now, does the fact that this bill is so much more narrowly focused just on this rather than sort of the omnibus, everything but the kitchen sink that was in Bill C-2, is that a recognition that that was not the right approach to this?
When we formed government, we introduced Bill C-2 days afterwards, and it was a suite of measures that were critically important for us from a border security perspective. As you're aware, we've introduced a number of other bills relating to security, and criminal justice, including C8, C9, C14.
But it does kind of feel like that big bill is now being carved off into more focused topics, and not only does that, focus the mind, I suppose, but would that not also increase your chances, especially since you're still in a minority situation, of getting those bills passed?
It allows us to focus and not be deterred by a tangential issue, right? And I think
there's no poison pills or things like that.
And the spirit in which this bill is being introduced, I've had a number of conversations with the opposition. I've had, continuously speak to my critics, and we're with the view, and I've no assurance whatsoever, but with the view that we can build consensus. I'm saying that this is not a bill that we want to politicize. This is not a bill where we want to get off track. What we want to do is we want to work with the opposition towards building a bill or finalizing a bill that law enforcement could use, at the same time ensuring that the proper safeguards are in place.
Now, I did mention that you're still in a minority situation, but you did just welcome a new member to your caucus, Laurie Idlout. And there are by-elections around the corner that could see your government finally secure that majority that clearly any government would want. Now, opposition parties are accusing your government of making backroom deals and acting undemocratically to get that majority. What is your response to that?
So, first and foremost, there are three by-elections happening. One in my backyard in Scarborough Southwest. We have an incredible candidate who happened to be the former deputy leader of the NDP. Provincially, who resigned and is seeking a mandate right now from her voters. So there's no backroom deal there. She's actually given up a role.
I don't think they're referring to
resigned.
that. They're referring to Laurie Idlout.
And of course, Laurie Idlout is...
And the others.
And you know, Laurie's a good friend. She's someone I've worked with for many, many years. I've visited her community. She's taken me on dog sled rides. And the reason I say it is because she is someone of deep understanding of the North. This is a moment, especially relating to Arctic sovereignty, especially relating to issues in Nunavut, where someone being in government can be critically beneficial for her and her constituents, and that's what she has expressed, that her constituents have asked her to be part of government and be part of solutions. Yesterday, I talked to her, and one of the first things I was able to do was there's $1.6 million in investments that we're going to put into Pond Inlet, and I'm giving her full visibility on what that looks like, and she will be able to reach out to the community and provide that support. It is about, at a moment where there are a number of issues going on around the world, particularly Arctic sovereignty, and I have a very big bias towards the Arctic, and we need everyone who has knowledge and understanding to be with us in this critical moment.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for your time today. That's the Minister of Public Safety, Gary Anandasangaree.